You were never meant to carry the guilt they left you with. Archangel Michael says that weight isn't yours. It was planted to keep you silent. There's a weight pressing against your spirit, quiet, unseen, but persistent. You feel it when you're alone. You sense it in your silence. It whispers lies through the voice of memory. It clings to your chest like smoke after a fire you didn't start. Archangel Michael says this heaviness was never yours to carry. It was handed to you through manipulation, through betrayal, through abandonment. And the enemy smiled when you swallowed it whole. You thought it was your fault. You were told it was your burden. But it wasn't. This is the message from heaven. The guilt they left you with was a spiritual weapon, crafted in the shadows to keep you from speaking your truth. You weren't wrong for surviving. You weren't wrong for protecting yourself. You weren't wrong for saying no. But somehow, the aftermath twisted you inward. They left and you were the one holding the grief, the shame, the weight of their decisions. This was not divine justice. It was a spiritual setup. Guilt was planted in your soul like a parasite to keep you from rising, to keep you questioning your value, to keep you silent. But the silence ends now. Archangel Michael has unsheathed his sword not to fight you, but to fight for you. The one who was left to clean up the aftermath. The one who was too sensitive. The one who saw through the lies but stayed quiet to keep the peace. You are not weak for feeling too much. You are gifted for sensing what others ignore. This message is not for everyone. It's for those who know what it feels like to carry the weight of someone else's actions. For those who felt the pain but were told they were the problem. Archangel Michael says you were set up to believe that carrying guilt was noble, righteous, even necessary. But that is a demonic lie. What was sown into you was not accountability. It was sabotage. The enemy tried to anchor your wings to the ground. But heaven is lifting you now. You are not here by accident. You were divinely led to this message so the unburdening could begin. And it begins with truth. Stay with this message. This isn't a motivational speech. This is a spiritual rescue. Over the next chapters, everything that was hidden will be revealed. Your name has been spoken in divine places. The guilt that was never yours is being uprooted now. Heaven is releasing the weight. Let Archangel Michael lead you through it. Type I am rising to get the blessing 4896. You were taught that silence was strength, that bearing your pain made you noble. You were told not to cry, not to confront, not to disturb the peace, because their comfort mattered more than your clarity. Somewhere along the way, you absorbed that message deep into your spirit. You began to feel guilty for needing space. You felt ashamed for being hurt. You even felt responsible for other people's decisions, other people's chaos. And that's where the root was planted. That's where the spiritual setup began. Quietly, covertly, but effectively. Guilt became your second skin, and the enemy counted on you never questioning it. But Archangel Michael saw it. He saw how your soul shrank every time you tried to speak and they dismissed you. You watched when your truth was met with mockery, when your courage was labeled dramatic, when your honesty was twisted into blame. They didn't want your truth. They wanted your silence. Because your voice carried weight. Because your emotions carried accuracy. And if you had kept speaking, you would have exposed the dysfunction, the manipulation, the spiritual imbalance they were trying to hide. So they silenced you with guilt. Not through violence, but through shame. Not with chains, but with spiritual gaslighting. And it worked, for a while. Type I am anointed to get blessing 5731. Until now. This moment is sacred. This part of your life is not another chapter. It's a spiritual uprising. Archangel Michael has been watching the years of guilt compound in your chest like bricks on your heart. And now, heaven is reversing the sentence. You do not owe an apology for surviving. You do not owe your silence in exchange for being loved. That was never real love. That was control disguised as intimacy. It was bondage dressed in affection. And the Spirit says, the guilt was the payment they demanded because they knew you were too pure to walk away without grief. So they infected your purity with shame. But guilt is not your covenant. It was never your cross to carry. Archangel Michael is breaking this deception now. The weight you've been carrying has altered your posture, your trust, your relationship with yourself. You've questioned your worth, doubted your path, and feared your own intuition because of guilt that was never yours. But today, a divine declaration is being made over your life. The guilt is broken. The guilt is not holy. The guilt is not your spiritual inheritance. You are not bound to pay for sins that weren't yours. The blood of your healing is not meant to mix with the poison they left behind. Type I am chosen to get the blessing 6127. You were never meant to carry it into your future. That guilt has served as a spiritual parasite, feeding off your compassion, disguising itself as accountability. But accountability brings freedom. Guilt brings paralysis. And Archangel Michael says, enough. You have stayed stuck in a loop of mental torment because of that invisible weight. But it was always spiritual warfare. It was always a dark strategy to keep you frozen. But the flame in your spirit is rising again. It might flicker. It might be tender. But it's real, and heaven honors the flicker before the fire. You don't need to roar yet. You just need to rise. There is someone watching this now who hasn't cried in years, not because they're healed, but because guilt locked their tears away. Heaven says your tears are returning, not as weakness but as a sign of resurrection. The tears will be sacred. They will not drain you. They will free you. Archangel Michael is handing you the keys to your emotional truth. You are being called back to your rightful identity. The guilt is not your garment anymore. You are wearing light now. You are speaking truth now. The weight is lifting. You are not imagining this. You are awakening. And no one gets to silence that awakening with guilt again. Type I am delivered to get the blessing 7204. There's a moment when the weight begins to shift. Not because your situation changes instantly, but because something in you refuses to keep bending beneath what isn't yours. That moment is holy. That resistance is sacred. That spiritual defiance, when you whisper no more into the silence, is louder than any scream. Archangel Michael had been waiting for that moment within you. And now that it's here, he moves swiftly. Because what was done to you wasn't just personal, it was spiritual. It was meant to paralyze your purpose, to deter your destiny, to keep your light dim behind walls of guilt that weren't even yours to build. This weight didn't come from one event. It came from patterns, from childhood wounds, generational silence, repeated emotional sabotage. You were trained to feel bad for speaking up. You were conditioned to walk on eggshells so others could stay comfortable in their dysfunction. But God did not create you to be anyone's emotional dumping ground. Archangel Michael says the enemy calculated that if he couldn't kill your calling, he'd contaminate your identity. So he weaponized guilt to distort your reflection. You began to see yourself as too much, too emotional, too sensitive. But heaven says, those labels were projections from people who feared your discernment. Type I am chosen to get the blessing 5819. Your sensitivity is not a curse. It's a compass. Your emotional awareness is not weakness. It's wisdom. And what they called overreacting was your spirit detecting dishonor. But because you were shamed into silence, you turned that awareness inward. You began to believe that if things fell apart, it was because you couldn't hold them together. But beloved, you were not meant to hold together brokenness that others refused to heal. You were not meant to make peace with dysfunction just to feel included. Archangel Michael says you were born to confront spiritual imbalance with truth, not to carry its consequences in your soul. You see it now. The pattern of guilt is not a reflection of your sins. It's a residue of your light threatening the shadows around you. The more clarity you held, the more guilt you were handed. But that was spiritual misdirection. It was never your guilt. It was their shame, transferred. It was their fear of being seen, masked as your obligation to stay quiet. You became the scapegoat because you could see what others ignored. But heaven sees what you carry. And Michael is lifting it now, not just from your emotions, but from your spiritual contracts. The guilt ends here, not because they apologized, but because heaven intervened. Type I am rising to get the blessing 7641. And yes, you might still hear their voices echo in your mind. You might still feel the guilt crawling in during quiet moments. But now you know it's not yours. And every time it tries to return, you'll have truth as your weapon. You'll have clarity as your compass. You'll have Archangel Michael standing beside you, sword drawn, declaring, "This one is mine. This one is rising." You will not be dragged back into shame because someone else refused to grow. You're not shrinking anymore. You're shedding what they projected. The unlearning has begun, and it is holy. Some will not recognize you without the guilt. They were comfortable with you being compliant. They preferred the version of you who bent over backwards, who apologized for things you didn't do, who walked away from truth just to keep the illusion of peace. But peace built on guilt is not peace, it's spiritual imprisonment. Heaven says the new you will make them uncomfortable. That's not your burden either. You are not returning to silence. You are not dressing your light in shame. The weight is gone, and so are the roles they cast you in. You are not playing along anymore. You're rising as you were always meant to. If this word has stirred your spirit and ignited boldness within you, consider showing your support with a super thanks of $20. Your generosity empowers us to continue releasing prophetic guidance, clarity, and strength to those journeying from betrayal to blessing. You can also support our mission through PayPal donation by clicking the support here link in the video description. Every contribution makes a meaningful impact and helps us keep creating and sharing with you. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel so you never miss a moment of divine instruction, heavenly insight, and spirit-led guidance designed for your breakthrough. Type I am free to get the blessing 7007. When you start to remove the guilt that was never yours, you begin to feel unfamiliar emotions, relief, grief, confusion, even fear. That's normal. Your nervous system was wired to carry guilt like a badge of humility. Letting it go can feel like betrayal, like you're abandoning the version of you who worked so hard to keep the peace. But Archangel Michael says you are not betraying yourself by shedding guilt. You are honoring your true identity. What you're leaving behind isn't integrity, it's spiritual infection. And the longer you hold on to that infection, the more it spreads into every area of your soul. This guilt made you question your worth every time someone walked away. It made you feel like the problem every time someone failed to show up for you. You weren't the cause, you were just the one who cared enough to try. But the enemy distorted your compassion into codependence, He made you think that if you just tried harder, stayed quieter, became smaller, then you'd finally be enough. But you were always enough. And the moment you believe that, the spiritual chains begin to crack. The light returns to your eyes, and the truth begins to echo louder than the lies you were fed. Type I am rising to get the blessing 6820. You see, guilt is sticky. It lingers in your thoughts. It disguises itself as humility, as love, even as responsibility. But there's a difference between responsibility and captivity. Responsibility acknowledges your part. Captivity claims all the blame. Guilt pushes you into captivity. It makes you own what others did to you. It makes you question your intuition when it's trying to warn you. But Michael says today is the day your intuition gets its voice back. Your instincts are being cleansed. Your internal compass is being recalibrated. Because now you know you were manipulated into submission. You were trained to carry what wasn't yours. This knowledge might make you angry. You let it rise. Righteous anger is not destruction. It's divine fire. That fire is not meant to consume you, but to cleanse you. There's nothing unspiritual about acknowledging injustice. There's nothing unrighteous about naming what happened. The enemy convinced you that forgiveness meant forgetting, that a healing meant denying, that peace meant silence. But peace isn't quiet when truth is screaming. Archangel Michael says your peace will come from alignment, not avoidance. And that starts with rejecting the guilt that was never yours. You are allowed to see clearly. You are allowed to be free. Type I am awakened to get the blessing 7913. You don't owe anyone the version of you who stayed small to make them comfortable. The guilt kept you there. The shame kept you bending. But now the veil is lifting. The spiritual fog is dissipating. You can see the roles you were cast in: the peacemaker, the fixer, the forgiver, the silent one. And you can finally lay them down. You are not the one who broke it, so stop being the one expected to fix it. You are not God. You are not their redemption story. You are not their dumping ground. You are your own soul, chosen and protected. And as you step forward, you'll feel the resistance from your own thoughts, from familiar spirits, maybe even from the people who benefited from your guilt. But walk anyway, rise anyway, speak anyway, because freedom isn't comfortable, it's courageous, and heaven celebrates every step you take. Archangel Michael is clearing the path. The old guilt will not find you in this new space. Your tears are sacred. Your voice is powerful. Your light is unapologetic. The shame that tried to own you is now beneath you. And as you rise, heaven roars in your defense. Let them hear it. Type I am claimed to get the blessing 8055. There is a sacred ache in your chest, and it's not weakness, it's awakening. That ache is the weight of what you were never meant to carry, pressing against the truth, trying to break free. For so long, you believed that guilt was your cross, that your silence was your duty. But it wasn't. That idea was planted to keep you small, to keep you humble in the wrong ways, to keep you confused about what love, loyalty, and self-respect were supposed to look like. Archangel Michael says, the guilt was never your spiritual assignment. It was their fear, wrapped in your empathy. That twisted your compassion into captivity. They knew you would internalize the blame because your heart was sincere. They bet on your goodness, your softness, your desire to do what's right. And so, they left the burden at your feet and walked away free. But heaven did not call you to live in emotional prison while others roam without consequence. The guilt you feel was transferred, not inherited. You are not responsible for the chaos they chose. You're responsible for your healing now. Type I am rising to get the blessing 7450. You weren't difficult. You were discerning. You weren't dramatic. You were disrupted. You weren't the problem. You were the proof that something was broken in them, not you. But instead of accountability, they gave you guilt. That was their transaction. Your way of staying clean in a situation, their hand stained. Archangel Michael says, this is the exposure. What you felt but couldn't say is now being confirmed in heaven's courtroom. You are not carrying this weight into your next chapter. Heaven has ruled in your favor. Even now, your soul trembles at the thought of letting go of guilt. Because guilt created structure. Guilt was your emotional compass. Guilt gave you a role. But that role wasn't real. It was a spiritual distraction. You were placed in the position of healer for those who never intended to heal. You became the emotional shock absorber in a cycle that drained you dry. But the divine shift is here. Archangel Michael says your identity is being rewritten. You are not the guilt bearer. You are the truth speaker. You are the cycle breaker. And heaven is roaring in agreement. Type I am chosen to get the blessing 8224. The grief you feel is not regression. It's release. As you shed guilt, you will shed people. Shed patterns. Shed the parts of you that were created only to keep the peace. The shedding is sacred. You're not losing your mind. You're reclaiming your spirit. And that's uncomfortable, yes, but necessary. Archangel Michael will not let you go backward. The guilt is too heavy for where you're going. Your wings were not designed to flap beneath shame. And now, finally, for flight. You are rising without apology, without explanation, without guilt. They may not understand this version of you, and that's okay. Understanding was never a prerequisite for your freedom. Their confusion is not your cage. You were never meant to carry the guilt they left you with. It was never yours to begin with. You can lay it down now, not in shame, but in authority. Archangel Michael stands beside you. The heavens have witnessed your surrender. And now, heaven declares, you are free. Type I am delivered to get the blessing 7399. There comes a moment in every soul's timeline when they look around and realize, this pain I'm carrying does not belong to me. This guilt that keeps haunting me did originate in my spirit. It was placed here like a seed in fertile soil, hoping I wouldn't notice it growing. But you've noticed now. And that noticing is everything. That awareness is what breaks the generational chains. That clarity is what summons the angels. Archangel Michael has been waiting for you to see it, because once you see the truth, no lie can hold you anymore. And the lie was, you deserved the shame they left behind. They never said it outright. They didn't have to. They weaponized silence. They poisoned glances. They wrapped their rejection in sweet words. They served guilt like it was grace. And you took it, because your heart was pure. Because you believed love meant sacrifice. But now you see it. That wasn't sacrifice. That was spiritual self-harm. And Michael is standing in the aftermath of your awakening saying, you're not crazy. You're not dramatic. You're not broken. You were set up to carry guilt that camouflaged itself as love. Type I am rising to get the blessing 6888. The betrayal wasn't just in what they did, it was in what they left you holding. The conversations they avoided. The blame they shifted. the energy they made you absorb just so they wouldn't have to look in the mirror. But Archangel Michael says, return it. Not in anger, but in authority. You are not responsible for what they buried. You are not their graveyard. You are not the keeper of secrets that were never safe to begin with. Heaven is not asking you to forgive and forget. Heaven is asking you to forgive and free yourself. Release what isn't yours. Do not feel guilty for remembering what they hoped you'd suppress. Do not feel bad for speaking what they were too afraid to admit. That's not bitterness, it's balance. You are not stuck in the past. You're healing the damage it caused in your nervous system, in your relationships, in your self-worth. And that takes more courage than pretending everything's fine. Michael says this is the divine cleansing of emotional debt. You've paid too long with your peace. The final transaction is happening now. And the price is no longer your silence. The price is their accountability, whether they face it or not. Type I am redeemed to get the blessing 7001. You don't need an apology to reclaim your power. You don't need closure from people who refuse to give you honesty. Closure is a lie when you're the only one closing the door. What you need is alignment with truth, with spirit, with yourself. And that begins by cutting off the flow of guilt at its root. The next time it whispers you could have done more, answer it boldly, I did enough. And even if I didn't, that was never a reason to carry shame. You are not a mistake wrapped in regret. You are a miracle wrapped in mercy. And mercy is speaking now. There's a storm you've been surviving, quietly. The kind no one saw coming because you smiled through it. You carried your family. You carried the silence. You carried the emotional fallout of other people's poor decisions. And still, they called you too much. Still, they looked to you to hold everything together while they fell apart unapologetically. But heaven saw it. Michael witnessed the tears you refused to cry. He felt the cracking in your chest when you buried your voice just to be accepted. He is your witness. And now, he's also your defender. You were never too much. You were just surrounded by those who gave too little. You were never unstable. You were just shaking under the weight of what wasn't yours to hold. The guilt was always theirs. It just looked better on you. But no more. This version of you, the one rising, is not interested in playing roles scripted by guilt. You are not an actor in someone else's denial. You are the author of a new narrative. And it begins now, with full permission to exist, speak, feel, and heal without guilt ever again. Type I am ascending to get the blessing 7997. Sometimes, guilt doesn't scream. It whispers. It slips in through moments of silence, through glances, through emotionally charged questions like, are you sure that's what happened? It hides in the sigh after your truth is spoken. It clings to pauses, waiting for you to second-guess yourself. That's how it survives, by making you wonder if you were too sensitive, too reactive, too much. But Archangel Michael says you weren't too much. You were the only one brave enough to name what others buried. The guilt you feel now is not a result of wrongdoing. It's the residue of truth met with resistance. You loved them anyway. Even when they made you doubt your memory, you loved them. Even when they made you carry the blame, you stayed. You held space for people who never held space for you. That was never weakness. That was loyalty in its rawest, rarest form. And yes, they mistook it for weakness. Yes, they saw your tenderness as an opportunity. But heaven never mistook it. Heaven recorded every tear, every silent scream, every moment you protected people who blamed you for the very pain they caused. Type I'm rising to get the blessing 7555. Let's speak clearly now. They were not confused. They were convicted. Your truth unsettled them. Your discernment exposed what they weren't ready to see. And instead of healing, they deflected. Instead of repenting, they projected. And where did the weight fall? On you. You, the one with the soft heart and wide eyes. You, the one who kept trying to fix what was never yours to mend. Archangel Michael says, you are not the villain. You are the vessel. You were placed in their story not to bend, but to break cycles. And guilt is no longer your price for that purpose. Your clarity is returning now. Totally. Powerfully. The fog of confusion is clearing, and what you're seeing is not too painful. It's too real to ignore. The lies you tolerated in the name of love. The guilt you swallowed to avoid being abandoned. The masks you wore just to be tolerated. But those days are done. There's no space in this next chapter for masks. There's no room for guilt-based roles. You are not here to make others comfortable by staying quiet. You're here to live in divine alignment. Archangel Michael says, your voice is your weapon, and your healing is your proof. Type I am purified to get the blessing 7033. You will no longer be manipulated by guilt that sounds like love. You will no longer stay silent because of what they might say about you. Let them talk. Let them misunderstand. Their misunderstanding is not your spiritual responsibility. You are not responsible for how your growth disrupts their control. And you are no longer a servant to the emotions of those who only came close to feed. You are not bitter. You are becoming bold. You are not vengeful. You are becoming visible. And visibility always threatens systems built on silence. But still, you rise. The atmosphere around you is shifting. People can feel your detachment from their games. They can sense your boundaries before you speak them. That's not coldness. That's clarity. That's not distance. It's divine defense. You don't owe anyone the former version of yourself that stayed silent just to be included. Inclusion built on guilt is not community. It's captivity. And you are walking out now. Archangel Michael walks with you. His wings shield you. His sword covers your exit. You are not escaping. You are emerging. The old version of you didn't fail. She fulfilled her assignment. And now she's handing you the key. If this word has stirred your spirit and ignited boldness within you, consider showing your support with a super thanks of $20. Your generosity empowers us to continue releasing prophetic guidance, clarity, and strength to those journeying from betrayal to blessing. You can also support our mission through PayPal donation by clicking the support here link in the video description. Every contribution makes a meaningful impact and helps us keep creating and sharing with you. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel so you never miss a moment of divine instruction, heavenly insight, and spirit-led guidance designed for your breakthrough. Type I am ascending to get the blessing 7337. There's something sacred happening in your spirit right now. A quiet unraveling. A holy breaking. Not the kind that leaves you in ruins, but the kind that sets you free. You've been wrapped in a story that was never yours to begin with. Told to feel bad for things you didn't cause. Trained to apologize for simply existing in your fullness. But Archangel Michael is peeling back the spiritual layers now. He's showing you the moments when guilt was handed to you like a gift, but it came wrapped in chains. And now, he's unlocking every link. You've carried emotional burdens for people who never carried you. And you did it because you thought it made you strong. They praised your silence. your selflessness, your patience. But they were really praising your suppression. Because as long as you stayed small, they didn't have to face themselves. But now that you've begun to rise, now that the guilt doesn't sit the same way in your spirit, they feel the tremble. That trembling isn't fear, it's your power returning to you. Peace by sacred peace. Type I am rising to get the blessing 7642. You were never designed to play small for someone else's comfort. That guilt you felt when you started speaking truth, that wasn't conviction. That was conditioning. And Archangel Michael says that conditioning is being destroyed. You don't have to keep explaining why you're walking away, why you're protecting your peace, why you no longer laugh at the jokes that diminish you. That guilt they want you to carry when you stop playing the role. Let it fall. It's not yours anymore. You are not responsible for their inability to honor you. It's hard, isn't it? Grieving the version of you that people like better, the quieter you, the agreeable you, the apologetic you. But that version was created through guilt, not love. She existed to survive. But you're not surviving anymore. You're remembering who you were before guilt wrapped its voice around your decisions. You are allowed to change without explanation. You are allowed to grow without guilt. You are allowed to protect your light without shame. Archangel Michael says the guilt is lifting, and with it, your true identity is emerging. Type I am chosen to get the blessing 7201. What you feel now is not confusion. It's clarity taking root. It's uncomfortable because you've lived so long with guilt as your internal GPS. Now that it's gone, you're having to relearn how to trust yourself. But that's holy work. That's sacred rebuilding. And every time you choose truth over guilt, you become stronger. Every time you say no without over-explaining, you reclaim your spirit. Heaven is watching. Archangel Michael is applauding. The one who once bent to please is now standing tall, and the realm of spirit trembles in reverence. You're not healing to make them proud. You're healing to make yourself whole. This journey is not about revenge. It's about resurrection. You don't have to prove to anyone that you were worthy all along. You are not here to fix their perception of you. You are here to finally live in alignment with heaven's vision of you. The guilt they left you with was loud, but the truth in you is louder now, and it is speaking, declaring, shaking the ground beneath every lie that tried to silence your voice. Type I'm awakened to get the blessing 7866. You weren't wrong for noticing the shift in energy. You weren't wrong for feeling the tension when you started standing up for yourself. That wasn't paranoia, it was your spirit waking up. The guilt they used to control you began to slip, and so did their grip. What you're feeling now isn't weakness, it's power unraveling the lie. The truth is, they never loved the real you. They loved the version of you guilt built, the one that bowed, bent, stayed quiet, smiled through pain, and apologized for breathing too loudly. That version kept them safe. But Archangel Michael says that version was never you. The real you is emerging now. She is not afraid of her voice. She no longer believes that speaking truth is cruelty. She understands that guilt has no place in authentic connection. You no longer feel obligated to defend yourself in spaces that mislabel your discernment as drama. That clarity, that stillness you feel, that's confirmation. Guilt will try to return, disguised as responsibility, but it no longer fits. It no longer sits in your bones like it used to. Heaven has overwritten that frequency. Michael has cut the cord. Type I'm rising to get the blessing 7933. There was a time when you would have stayed. when guilt would have convinced you to tolerate one more lie, one more slight, one more boundary crossed, but not anymore. A version of you is fading, and what replaces her is solid, grounded, apologetic. You don't need to perform for peace anymore. You are not responsible for keeping dysfunctional systems running with your silence. The guilt said, if you leave, everything falls apart. But truth says, if it crumbles without your pain, it was never built with love. Archangel Michael is tearing down everything built on your suppression. You're not just healing from people, you're healing from programs, from spiritual contracts signed through trauma, from emotional debts you never owed, from generational patterns of silence, shame, and people-pleasing. This guilt didn't start with you. It was passed down. But it ends with you. You are the interruption, the one heaven trusted with the cleanup. That burden wasn't punishment. It was proof that you had the strength to break it. And now, as you rise, your ancestors rejoice. The guilt that kept generations bound will not pass through your bloodline again. Type I am liberated to get the blessing 7585. You've asked yourself, why do I still feel this weight? And the answer is, because your soul remembers what your mouth never got to say. Unspoken truth carries weight. But this is your permission to speak now, to release it, to give the pain language. Archangel Michael stands beside you as witness. You were not created to carry unspoken grief. The guilt is being burned away by revelation, and what remains is not shame, but power. The power to create new stories, new boundaries, and new beginnings. The people who once benefited from your guilt will not recognize this version of you. Let them be confused. You're not rising for them. You're rising for you. For the little girl who cried alone in rooms of silence. For the younger you who was blamed for simply feeling too deeply. You are not her anymore, but you are healing her now. This is generational work. Heaven has assigned Archangel Michael to guide you through it. And he declares, your path is protected, your voice is sanctified, and your future is no longer buried under the shame of someone else's denial. Type I am protected to get the blessing 7199. The guilt didn't just slow you down, it rewired how you saw yourself. It became the filter you viewed your worth through. You began questioning every instinct, every decision, every word, wondering if you were too much or not enough. But it wasn't you. It was the guilt speaking. The voice that told you to shrink wasn't the voice of God. It was the residue of control. It was the enemy's voice mimicking your own, trying to convince you that your presence was a problem. Archangel Michael says, that voice is being silenced now, permanently. You were never too much. You were just too aware for people who weren't ready to face themselves. They mistook your clarity for aggression. They called your passion a threat. They twisted your truth into conflict, just to avoid accountability. And every time they did, you shrunk a little more. Until the version of you left behind wasn't the real you. It was a version built from guilt, survival, and silence. But that version has served her time, and the real you is returning, untamed, undiminished, and divinely protected. Type I am rising to get the blessing 7410. Here is divine justice unfolding now. Not revenge, but restoration. Heaven is not focused on punishing those who wronged you. It's focused on resurrecting the parts of you they buried. For too long, you confused guilt with growth. You thought if it hurt, it must be healing. But pain without truth is just torment. You're not called to tolerate torment. You're called to transform through truth. Archangel Michael says, this transformation cannot happen under the weight of guilt. It must be laid down, not returned, not redirected, just dropped, because it never belonged to you. You've over-explained, over-apologized, and over-sacrificed, and none of it brought peace, just exhaustion. Because guilt was never meant to be your guide. You were meant to be led by discernment, not by fear of abandonment. The reason you feel lighter now is because the cords are breaking. What once bound you is losing power. What once paralyzed you is now beneath your feet. Heaven says the shift is irreversible. You don't have to earn freedom. You only need to claim it. And that's what you're doing now. With every breath, with every boundary, with every no you use to choke on. Type I'm hold to get the blessing 7841. When you started to reclaim your voice, the people who benefited from your silence panicked. Let them. Their discomfort is not your burden. You were not born to play a role in someone else's false story. You were born to embody divine truth. And the truth is, you are not guilty. You are not broken. You are not responsible for their lack of healing. The weight they put on you was strategic. But now the strategy has failed. Because you've awakened. And awakening is the most powerful rebellion against spiritual control. This season of your life is not just about release, it's about reintroduction. You're meeting yourself again, and she's powerful. He's clear. She's no longer apologizing for surviving. The enemy tried to bury her under layers of guilt, but he forgot that resurrection was written in your DNA. Archangel Michael stands beside you as you rise, not as a victim of guilt, but as a vessel of glory. What was meant to silence you has become your story, and your story will set others free. If this word has stirred your spirit and ignited boldness within you, consider showing your support with a super thanks of $20. Your generosity empowers us to continue releasing prophetic guidance, clarity, and strength to those journeying from betrayal to blessing. You can also support our mission through PayPal donation by clicking the support here link in the video description. Every contribution makes a meaningful impact and helps us keep creating and sharing with you. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel so you never miss a moment of divine instruction, heavenly insight, and spirit-led guidance designed for your breakthrough. Type I am light to get the blessing 7771. You're walking into spaces now with a different energy. The shame doesn't follow you the way it used to. The second guessing is quieter. The weight of needing to be understood is disappearing. That's not detachment. It's divine healing. You no longer feel the urge to explain your peace to people who profited from your pain. You're not angry. You're aligned. And alignment has made you look unfamiliar to those who only recognized you when guilt was controlling your movements. Archangel Michael says, what they see now is your original form, restored, refined, and rising. You've reconnected with a part of yourself that existed before the guilt took over. The you that believed her own feelings. The you that trusted her instincts. That version of you didn't need external validation. He carried inner knowing. And now she's re-emerging. The noise of guilt is no longer loud enough to drown her out. She knows you never deserved what was done to her. She knows the weight was never meant for her back, and that knowing is dangerous to every system that once fed on your silence. Type I am rising to get the blessing 7682. There's a different kind of grief you're carrying now. Not because you want the past back, but because you finally see it clearly. You see how long you kept the peace at your own expense. You see the moments you called love that were really emotional manipulation. And it hurts, but it also frees you. That clarity doesn't come to destroy you. It comes to release you. You are not bitter, you're awake. Archangel Michael says, grief is not your enemy here. It's the final release of the guilt that's lived too long in your blood. You've learned now that guilt is not the same as accountability. Accountability allows for healing. Guilt demands punishment. Accountability brings light. Guilt thrives in shadows. And for too long, you were buried beneath a guilt that kept you apologizing for being honest, for being hurt, for being human. But now you know better. And knowing better doesn't just change your thoughts, it changes your posture. You're standing straighter, breathing deeper. You're no longer carrying the sins of people who refuse to carry themselves. You are not their karma. You are your own redemption. Type I am free to get the blessing 7244. There will be some who try to bring the old version of you back. Not out of love, but out of control. Let them try. You don't have to defend your healing to those still committed to denial. The moment you stopped letting guilt guide your relationships was the moment heaven began guiding them. Archangel Michael is not just protecting your path, he's purging it. The people, places, and patterns that once drained you are being removed without warning. You don't have to chase. What's leaving can go. What's meant for you won't guilt you into staying. You're not just being healed, you're being sanctified. Guilt had you convinced you had to prove you were worthy. But worthiness is your birthright, not your burden. You were chosen before the first lie, protected before the first betrayal. The guilt was never proof that you were wrong. It was evidence that your presence exposed what others didn't want to fix. You were the light they tried to dim, but they failed. You're still here, still rising. And this time, without the chains they left behind. Type I am holy to get the blessing 7090. You didn't lose yourself. You were buried under guilt. And now, piece by piece, heaven is uncovering who you've always been. The one who knew how to speak clearly. The one who felt things deeply. The one who questioned when no one else had the courage to. You were taught that guilt was a teacher, but in your life, it became a thief. It stole your clarity and distorted your reflection. But Archangel Michael is restoring it all. He's pulling back the layers of false guilt and revealing the truth. You were never the problem. You were the one carrying what others couldn't face. They told you to forgive, but never asked them to apologize. They told you to move on, but never held them accountable. And so, guilt became your only language. Your body learned to flinch before your voice could rise. But heaven has heard every word your soul never said. Archangel Michael has recorded every moment you blamed yourself for their choices. And now, he's releasing the divine decree. Enough. You will not live another day under a burden built by deception. What's breaking now is ancient, and it's beautiful. Type I am rising to get the blessing 7428. Let this sink in. Your guilt did not make you holy. It made you hesitant. It stopped you from claiming opportunities, relationships, healing, all because you thought you weren't worthy. And the people around you never corrected the lie, because it served them. But heaven is not silent anymore. Your divine worth is not measured by how long you can endure pain. It's measured by how boldly you walk away from what doesn't serve your soul. Archangel Michael says the shift is not rebellion. It's realignment. You are coming home to yourself, and nothing about that is wrong. When you begin healing, guilt often tries to disguise itself as responsibility again. It'll whisper, maybe you were too harsh. It'll nudge, maybe you misunderstood. But pause. Breathe. Remember what it felt like to silence your truth for someone else's convenience. Remember the weight you carried just to make others feel comfortable in their dysfunction. That wasn't love. That wasn't fairness. That was spiritual sabotage. You don't owe anyone a return to that version of you. The one who bit her tongue raw. The one who made herself small. That version was survival. But you're not surviving now. You're rising. Type I am anointed to get the blessing 7655. And as you rise, don't be surprised when your boundaries offend the ones who had none. Don't be surprised when they label you selfish, cold, arrogant. But Archangel Michael says those labels are not your concern. Your healing is not a group decision. Your voice is not a threat. It's a weapon formed in silence and sharpened in truth. Use it. You are not dishonoring anyone by choosing yourself. You are honoring the divine blueprint that was buried under guilt for far too long. Let them misunderstand. You are not here for their approval. You are here for your assignment. You spent enough time holding your breath, shrinking in rooms, playing the part of the peacemaker while your spirit screamed for truth. But peace built on your pain is not peace, it's spiritual oppression. And you're done with that. Archangel Michael is clearing your path, cutting the cords, unbinding your voice. You are not a martyr for someone else's emotional chaos. You are not a container for their dysfunction. You are a vessel of divine power, and heaven is calling you to rise. Not quietly, not coyly, but completely. Type I am reborn to get the blessing 7306. There's something powerful about realizing you no longer need to prove anything. Not your goodness, not your intentions, not your side of the story. The guilt once made you explain yourself over and over, trying to convince people of what your spirit already knew was true. But those days are over. You've moved beyond the reach of false obligation. You no longer negotiate with guilt just to feel worthy. Heaven never required those sacrifices. Archangel Michael says, your worth was not in question. Only your awareness of it was under attack. You've been walking through fire with no smoke on your clothes. They expected you to fall apart, to break under the pressure of their silence and their absence. But instead, you rose. Widely, boldly, without an audience or applause. You chose your peace over their validation, and that was a holy act. The guilt that used to scream at you for choosing yourself has gone silent. Archangel Michael has silenced the accuser, and now your spirit breathes freely. Your space is sacred. Your silence is not weakness, it's protection. Type I'm rising to get the blessing 7770. You've learned the difference between guilt and conviction. Conviction draws you back to alignment. Guilt pulls you away from yourself. Conviction is love. Guilt is fear. And now that you know the difference, you won't be fooled again. Archangel Michael says that every time guilt tries to crawl back in, your truth will rise to meet it. You don't have to keep defending your growth. You don't have to feel bad for the boundaries you built out of survival and wisdom. What once felt like betrayal now feels like deliverance. And that's not selfish. That's sacred clarity. What once triggered shame now triggers remembrance. You remember the moments where you bit your tongue to protect someone who wouldn't do the same for you. You remember crying, and then apologizing for crying. You remember choosing quiet over confrontation because guilt told you conflict was wrong. But now, you remember without hurting. You remember without returning. Your memory is being healed. Your body is releasing the trauma that guilt held hostage. You're no longer available for emotional manipulation disguised as loyalty. You're available for truth and for peace, for purpose. nothing less. Type I am released to get the blessing 7390. Your light is louder than their opinions now. Your truth is no longer something you hide to keep others comfortable. Archangel Michael says the season of guilt-driven choices is over. You don't have to keep walking on eggshells in places you were never meant to enter barefoot. The version of you who kept peace while carrying pain has served your purpose. And now, the new you, strong, whole, untethered, has taken her place. Not out of bitterness, but out of revelation. You've finally seen who you are without the weight of their projections. You are not responsible for how others handle your transformation. You are not obligated to make them feel better about the boundaries you had to build. If guilt tries to sneak in when they misunderstand your silence, let it pass. That emotion is not yours. That pressure is not heaven sent. Archangel Michael declares, your spirit is being fortified against false emotional burdens. The guilt that once held your decisions hostage no longer has jurisdiction. This is your exodus. This is your becoming. This is your freedom. Unapologetic, unbothered, and unstoppable. Type I am untouchable to get the blessing 7588. You were never meant to carry the guilt they left you with. That weight, that sorrow, that silencing, none of it was ordained by heaven. It was assigned by broken people who didn't want to take responsibility for the pain they caused. They planted shame in your garden and told you it was humility. They buried your voice beneath their dysfunction and called it peace. But now you know better. And knowing better is holy. Knowing better is heaven's invitation to rise. You have journeyed through fire and silence, through confusion and awakening. You have shed tears in secret and fought battles no one ever acknowledged. But heaven saw. Heaven recorded it all. Archangel Michael never left your side. His sword has been cutting through the lies. His wings have been shielding you from collapse. And now, standing at the edge of this transformation, you are no longer defined by what broke you. You are defined by what you dared to walk away from. You're not walking with guilt anymore, you're walking with wisdom. You don't need to justify why you stopped carrying their burden. The truth is enough. The truth is sacred. And the truth is, you were strong enough to survive it, but wise enough to release it. That is not betrayal. That is liberation. And heaven celebrates you for it. You were never too much. You were never the problem. You were never unworthy of love. That guilt was a trick, spiritual sleight of hand meant to blind you to your own brilliance. But the fog has lifted. Your sight is clear. Your soul is light. And your heart, once heavy with unspoken grief, now beats with holy clarity. You've returned to yourself. And in that return, the heavens rejoice. Let them say you've changed. You have. You've become who you were always meant to be, without their shame, without their blame, without their control. You are not a prisoner of memory anymore. You are a prophet of freedom. And this moment is your confirmation. You are no longer who guilt tried to make you. You are who God always knew you were. If this word has stirred your spirit and ignited boldness within you, consider showing your support with a super thanks of $20. Your generosity empowers us to continue releasing prophetic guidance, clarity, and strength to those journeying from betrayal to blessing. You can also support our mission through PayPal donation by clicking the Support Here link in the video description. Every contribution makes a meaningful impact and helps us keep creating and sharing with you. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel so you never miss a moment of divine instruction, heavenly insight, and spirit-led guidance designed for your breakthrough. I am free forever to get the blessing 7777.